In 1994, a sports writer asked Albert Belle if he had any comments for the media. Belle looked at him and said nothing for 15 seconds. Then he walked away. That is not a metaphor. That is a thing that actually happened. And it is the most polite interaction he had with a reporter in his entire career.
Based on instructions from my attorney, I will not comment on the appeal. Thank you.
Oh, this is just like the play.
Bayerner running, fly ball hit well to left. Home run for Albert Belle.
This is the story of Albert Belle, one of the most feared hitters of the 1990s, a man whose statistics belong in any legitimate conversation about the greatest right-handed power hitters in the history of baseball. It is also the story of a man who was in a permanent, ongoing, total war with the media, opposing players, his own teammates, random fans in the bleachers, holiday celebrations, and the city of Cleveland, simultaneously for over a decade. To understand Albert Belle, you first have to understand Cleveland baseball in the late 1980s. The Cleveland Indians were not just bad, they were historically, legendarily, record-breakingly bad. They lost 100 games in 1985. They lost 101 in 1987. They played in a stadium so large and so empty that the echo of a foul ball could be heard from the parking lot. The team was the subject of a 1989 sports comedy film called Major League, in which a group of misfits tries to deliberately lose games to help a scheming owner relocate the franchise. It was a comedy. Cleveland fans recognized it as documentary filmmaking.
Every time we win, we peel a section.
Into this environment arrived Albert Joan Belle, a first-round pick out of LSU, a converted catcher-turned-outfielder, a man with an arm like a cannon and a swing that looked like he was personally offended by every pitch thrown to him. He arrived in Cleveland in 1989. He hit .225 his first year. He was young, he was raw, and by multiple accounts, he was already the most difficult personality in the entire minor league system. He was also about to become something no one in Cleveland had seen in a very long time, a baseball player worth watching. Albert Belle did not want to be your friend. He did not want to sign your baseball. He did not want to answer your question. He did not want to explain himself or smile for your camera or give you a quotable soundbite or participate in any aspect of the experience of being a public figure that did not involve standing 60 feet from a pitcher and making him regret his career choices. What he wanted to do was hit. And for roughly a decade, he did it at a level that very few right-handed hitters in the history of the game have matched.
Albert Belle was moody and reclusive, and only rarely did he try to explain himself. Frequently, that task was undertaken by his twin brother, Terry, a former teammate of Albert.
From 1991 through 1996, Belle averaged 38 home runs and 117 RBIs per season. Numbers that, during a period when power statistics were already inflating due to factors we will get to later, still stood out as extraordinary.
Full count. Bayerner running, fly ball hit well to left field. Back is Vaughn to the warning track, to the wall, it's gone!
In 1995, he hit 50 home runs and drove in 126 runs. He hit .317 and slugged .690. He led the Cleveland Indians, the franchise that was a punchline 11 years earlier, to the World Series for the first time since 1954.
This could be it. It is. Number 50 for Belle. Stop pitch!
Indian fans have waited 41 years.
And the Cleveland Indians are in the World Series.
You guys haven't seen nothing yet.
In 1996, he hit 48 home runs and drove in 148 runs. He lost the MVP award that year to Juan Gonzalez of the Texas Rangers by 3 votes, a decision so controversial that 2 voters publicly stated they deliberately left Belle off their ballots because they didn't think he deserved it. As a person, let that sit. Voters acknowledged they voted against his numbers because of his personality. That's how much everyone disliked Albert Belle.
I picked Mo over Albert for MVP that year. I picked Albert second. Albert clearly had the better offensive numbers, but Albert was not a good citizen in baseball, and Mo was.
Belle was not always this way, or at least the record of who he was before baseball is mixed enough to suggest that the sport and its demands on young men who have talent and nothing else contributed something to who he became. He grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana, the son of a high school football and basketball coach. He was studious, he was ambitious, he attended LSU on a baseball scholarship, and majored in mathematics. He was, by most accounts before the major leagues, a different person. What happened between Baton Rouge and Cleveland is partly a story about alcohol. Belle acknowledged in the mid-1990s that he had sought treatment for a drinking problem, and partly a story about a man who decided somewhere along the way that the only thing that mattered was the work, the actual work, the labor of being the most dangerous hitter in the American League. Everything else was noise. The media was noise. The fans were noise. The opposing teams were noise. His own teammates were, on certain days, noise. The problem was that Albert Belle's noise had a way of breaking things.
Bad boy Belle.
Belle was, for an extended period in the mid-1990s, the most covered player in the American League and the least cooperative subject in the history of baseball journalism. Not exaggerating. Baseball writers from that era have discussed him in terms usually reserved for acts of nature. You didn't interview him, you survived him. Belle's official policy with the media was, essentially, nothing. He did not do interviews. When forced to speak by team PR staff, he did it in monosyllables. He once famously answered 14 consecutive questions with variations of "next question" before walking out of a press conference entirely. ESPN cameras assigned to cover him on game days described the experience as attempting to document a man who had filed a restraining order against eye contact. In 1995, during the World Series, a Fox sideline reporter named Hannah Storm approached Belle before a game for a brief on-camera comment. He told her, in language that was immediately bleeped and became the subject of a league investigation, to go away. Those were not the exact words. The league fined him. Belle did not apologize and didn't even appear to notice. What's remarkable, and what the sports media of the 1990s struggled with endlessly, is that Belle was very clearly not simply shy. He was not an introvert who found public speaking difficult. He was a man who had made a conscious decision that the press had nothing to offer him. He understood the game completely. He knew exactly how he was perceived, and he did not care. The media predictably retaliated the only way they could, by covering every negative thing Belle ever did in exhaustive, gleeful detail. And Albert, to his great credit as a content generator, gave them a lot of material.
Belle throws a glancing right blow at George Williams, the catcher. Belle is set. Watch it again.
October 31st, 1995. The Cleveland Indians have just lost the World Series to the Atlanta Braves in 6 games. It is Halloween. Albert Belle is home. A group of teenagers, by multiple accounts, somewhere between 10 and 15 years old, are toilet papering his lawn. This is a thing that happens on Halloween. It is annoying. Most adults either ignore it, shoo the kids away, or if they're feeling aggressive, tell them to cut it out and go home. Most adults are not Albert Belle. Belle got in his car, pursued the teenagers through his neighborhood at speeds described by witnesses as not appropriate for a residential street, and when he caught them, he got out of the car and confronted them. The teenagers scattered. One of them was struck by his vehicle. The incident was reported to police. The commissioner of baseball investigated. Belle was fined $15,000. He chased teenagers on Halloween in a suburb of Cleveland in a car because they were toilet papering his lawn. When asked about the incident, Belle said the teenagers had been using racial slurs. This may be true. It may even change how you feel about the story, but it does not change the fact that a 6'2", 220-pound professional baseball player who hit 50 home runs that year got in his car and chased down a group of high school freshmen on All Hallows Eve because they threw toilet paper at his grass. He was fined. Once again, he was not sorry. On July 15, 1994, the Chicago White Sox did something unprecedented in a baseball game. Midway through a contest against the Cleveland Indians, White Sox manager Gene Lamont walked to home plate and asked the umpires to inspect Albert Belle's bat. He had reason to believe, he said, that the bat was corked. Corking a bat Drilling a hole in the barrel and filling it with cork to reduce weight and potentially increase bat speed is illegal under baseball rules. It is also one of the more colorful forms of cheating the sport has ever produced. The umpires took the bat. They put it in the umpire's locker room for safekeeping, to be examined after the game. They locked the door. As crazy as this sounds, sometime during the game, a person climbed through the air vent of the locked umpire's locker room, retrieved Belle's bat, replaced it with a legal bat borrowed from a teammate, reportedly Paul Sorrento, and disappeared back through the ventilation system. The substitution was discovered almost immediately. There were witnesses. The retrieved bat was traced. The whole thing unraveled within hours. The person who climbed through the vent was later identified as Jason Grimsley, a relief pitcher for the Cleveland Indians, who confirmed the story years later during a federal drug investigation that had nothing to do with corked bats. Grimsley had apparently volunteered for this mission. He had shimmied through an air duct in a major league stadium to swap a bat, because Albert Belle had asked someone to do this, and someone had said yes. The MLB investigation found the replacement bat, tested both bats, the original and the one recovered from the locked room, and determined that the original bat had been corked. Belle was suspended for 10 games. The suspension was later reduced to 7 on appeal. The Indians filed that appeal with a straight face. Here is the part that makes this story genuinely remarkable. Albert Belle was already one of the most feared hitters in baseball. He was in the middle of a historic season. His raw numbers, corked bat or not, were extraordinary. The man was hitting the ball an average of 405 feet. The extra bat speed provided by cork shaving is estimated by physicists to add, at most, 2 to 4 feet to a batted ball. Albert Belle corked his bat. He cheated. And he was also, empirically, one of the best hitters in the sport with or without the cork. Fernando Vina was a second baseman for the Milwaukee Brewers. In 1996, during a game against Cleveland, Vina was in the baseline when Albert Belle was running from first to second on a grounder. Belle ran directly into Vina. Not accidentally, not incidentally. Directly, deliberately, at full speed, in a way that left Vina on the ground and Belle continuing without breaking stride. The play was reviewed. Belle was fined, yet again. Several Brewers expressed opinions about Albert Belle that their mothers likely did not teach them to say out loud.
Watch Albert Belle. Does he pull his arms out? Does he give him a forearm shiver? Yeah, he does.
A reporter asked Belle about the play afterward. Belle stared at the reporter for a moment and then said, and this is a documented quote, "He was in my way."
Today, American League President Gene Budick said, an act that puts the safety of a player in serious jeopardy won't be tolerated, and handed down a 5-game suspension.
The Clubhouse stories about Belle from this era constitute a separate genre of baseball literature. Former teammates describe a man who ate alone, who did not speak to people he had no reason to speak to, and who had a habit of destroying objects in the clubhouse after bad games. Not his own objects, the team's objects, dugout phones, water coolers, chairs, a television. On one memorable occasion, the replacement bill was reportedly factored into his cost of doing business with the Cleveland organization. And yet, and this is what makes Albert Belle one of the genuinely fascinating figures in baseball history, multiple teammates also describe a man of fierce intelligence, of genuine team commitment in his own way, who studied pitchers with a devotion bordering on obsession. He knew every pitcher in the league. He knew their tendencies, their release points, their willingness to come inside. He wasn't checked out. He was, in his way, the most prepared player in the room. He just expressed it differently than you might hope. After the 1996 season, Belle became a free agent. He was 30 years old. He was coming off back-to-back seasons of 48 and 50 home runs. He had driven in at least 101 runs for 5 consecutive years. He had made 5 consecutive All-Star teams. He was, on the field, worth every dollar that any team with sense would offer him. He also came with a file. Every general manager in the American League knew what they were getting: the media wars, the fan incidents, the corked bat, the Halloween car chase, the Brewers' second baseman, the destroyed electronics. All of it was known. None of it was a secret. The Chicago White Sox signed him anyway. 5 years, $55 million. At the time, the largest contract in baseball history. Owner Jerry Reinsdorf understood exactly what he was purchasing. He purchased it anyway. Belle played 2 seasons in Chicago. He hit 30 and 49 home runs. He drove in 116 and 152 runs, the second figure leading the American League.
That ball hit deep, way back. You can put it on the ball.
He was magnificent at the plate. He was Albert Belle everywhere else. In 1998, the White Sox let him go. He signed with the Baltimore Orioles for 5 years and $65 million. A new record. Baltimore had seen what happened in Chicago. They signed him anyway. There is something philosophically interesting about this pattern. Every team knew, every front office had access to the same stories. And every front office, when presented with the numbers, the actual numbers on an actual stat sheet, looked at the human being those numbers represented and said, yes, fine, we'll take it. The production was worth the chaos. The chaos was a known quantity. The production was not available anywhere else. Albert Belle did not get to go out on his terms. That is maybe the most genuinely sad part of a career that has plenty of dark material to work with. In 1999, his first season in Baltimore, he hit .297 with 37 home runs and 117 runs batted in.
As far as the clubhouse with Mike Hargrove and his staff, Albert Belle with a monstrous shot and see you.
Still excellent, still terrifying, but there were signs. He was moving differently. His range in left field was declining. The hip, his right hip, which had been bothering him, which he had been managing, was getting worse. In 2000, he played in only 23 games. Hip replacement surgery was performed. He attempted a comeback. The hip did not cooperate. In August of 2000, at the age of 33, Albert Belle retired from baseball. He did not hold a press conference. He did not give an extended interview. He did not wave goodbye to the crowd or get a tribute video. He simply stopped playing. He walked away, as quietly as he was capable of walking away from anything. The Orioles owed him a substantial portion of the remaining contract. There was a clause that voided the remaining payments if Belle was unable to play. The dispute over whether he qualified for that clause went to arbitration. It was settled. He received a portion of the money. He did not hold a press conference about that either. Albert Belle appeared on the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot for the first time in 2006. He received votes on 7.7% of ballots. You need 75%. He spent 10 years on the ballot and never came close to election, topping out at 17.5% in 2013 before falling off entirely. The case for Belle is statistical, a peak that ranks among the 10 most dominant offensive stretches any right-handed hitter has ever produced. The case against him involves the corked bat, the era-wide steroid suspicions, and the small but determined number of voters who remember who he was as a person and decided that mattered. The case against him looks, from a distance, a little like the case he made against himself for his entire career. The numbers are overwhelming, the vibe is not. And for Albert Belle, the vibe was always going to be a problem. Here is the simplest way to summarize Belle's career. In a 9-year peak, from 1991 through 1999, he averaged 38.5 home runs per season, a .295 average, and 116 runs batted in. He hit 50 home runs in a strike-shortened 154-game season and should have won the MVP award twice. He was the most feared hitter in the American League for half a decade. He played in 1 World Series. He made 5 All-Star teams. He chased teenagers in a car on Halloween. He had a teammate shimmy through a ventilation system to replace a corked bat. He used language at a network television reporter that required the invention of new bleeping technology. He was, in the estimation of nearly everyone who covered him, managed him, coached him, or played against him, the single most difficult human being in the American League at any given moment. Both things are completely true. That is the whole point. There are players who are beloved and get into the Hall of Fame. There are players who are beloved and don't. There are players who are despised and have numbers that force the conversation anyway. Albert Belle is in the last category, in a category of one, in a corner of that category where no one wants to sit next to him, which, when you think about it, is exactly how he would have wanted it. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and check out some of our other content right here.